Welcome back to the deep dive. This time we're going deep on this idea of psychiatric diagnosis and classification. We've got some interesting stuff to look at, excerpts from a textbook on the subject by Mario Madge, and then a research paper on the impact of social media on mental well-being. It should be pretty interesting to see how we understand and categorize mental health, especially, with how the world's changing.
Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating combo of sources, and yeah, it's interesting how our understanding of mental health is changing so much, especially with all the new technology we have.
Yeah, one of the first things that jumped out at me in Mage's book was just how different psychiatric diagnosis is compared to other medical diagnoses. Like, it's not like you can just get a blood test or an x-ray to figure out what's going on in the brain.
Right, that's one of the biggest challenges with psychiatry. A lot of the diagnoses rely on observations from clinicians and what the patients themselves report about what they're experiencing. And that makes it tricky because you've got cultural factors that influence the process and individual interpretations. It's very subjective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, what might be seen as a problem in one culture could be totally normal in another. So how do mental health professionals try to create some consistency? How do they try to diagnose these conditions?
Well, there are a couple of main approaches. The first one is the categorical approach, which tries to put disorders into distinct categories, like anxiety disorders or mood disorders. You can almost think of it like organizing books by genre. Each book belongs to a specific category.
So you're kind of sorting mental health conditions into neat little boxes.
Yeah, exactly. But then there's also the dimensional approach, which sees mental health more on a spectrum. So it acknowledges that people experience varying degrees of symptoms and that these conditions don't always fit neatly into those boxes, more like a dimmer switch than an on-off switch.
So it's not as simple as saying someone definitely has or doesn't have a particular condition.
Right, and because there aren't any clear-cut biological markers for a lot of these mental health conditions, there's this ongoing debate, and they're constantly revising diagnostic criteria. A good example is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM.
Ah, yes, the DSM. Everybody knows that one. But I'm guessing it's not without its controversies.
Oh, for sure. It's a powerful tool for sure because it provides this common language for mental health professionals, which is super important for communication, research, and treatment planning.
It sounds like it's trying to be a universal guide for understanding mental health.
You could say that. But it's also important to be aware of the limitations. It's been criticized for potentially leading to overdiagnosis, meaning that normal human experiences could end up being pathologized or seen as a disorder. And there are also concerns about potential cultural biases in the framework.
Yeah, that's something to keep in mind. But if the DSM is constantly being revised, does that mean it's becoming more accurate? Or are we just kind of shifting how we understand these conditions?
That is a great question, and it's something researchers are looking into right now. Are we getting better at recognizing and diagnosing conditions, or are there other factors at play? Like maybe our social environment is changing and the influence of technology is having some role in this apparent increase in mental health diagnoses.
That's a good point. And that's a good segue to our next source, which is that research paper on social media's impact on mental well-being. I was surprised by how it presented social media as both potentially good and bad for mental health.
It's a double-edged sword for sure. The research highlights both sides. On the one hand, social media can be really beneficial. It can help foster a sense of community, which is especially helpful for people who might have difficulty connecting with others in person. And it can provide access to information and resources that support mental well-being.
So it's like this online support system that's available 24/7.
Yeah, in a way.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of new digital mental health interventions that are using technology to deliver therapy and support through platforms that people are already using.
That's amazing.
Ah.
But you mentioned the other side of this. What are some of the negative impacts that the research paper highlighted?
Well, the research shows that too much social media use, particularly among young people, is linked to more anxiety, depression, and body image issues. I mean, it's easy to compare yourself to others and to all that curated perfection that people put online, which can make you feel inadequate. And there's the fear of missing out, FOMO, as they call it.
It's definitely easy to get caught up in comparing yourself to others when you're scrolling through all those highlight reels.
It really is. And the research paper digs into a really concerning issue: cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying is a huge issue. I can only imagine how bad it must be to experience harassment online.
And the research findings are alarming. Cyberbullying is linked to a much higher risk of depression, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts. The anonymity and reach of the internet make it a really potent and damaging form of bullying.
It's awful,
Yeah.
especially because, like you said, it can feel relentless since it can happen anywhere and at any time.
You're right. The impact can be very isolating and traumatic with some lasting consequences.
So given all that, does the research suggest we should just get rid of social media?
Not necessarily. The research emphasizes mindful engagement. It's not about avoiding it completely, but about being more conscious of how you're using it and how it makes you feel.
So it's more about having a healthier relationship with social media, like
Yeah.
setting boundaries and being more intentional about what you're looking at and engaging with online.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance, being more aware of your online habits, making choices that are good for you. You can think of it like a healthy media diet.
That's a good analogy. Just like we choose to eat healthy foods, we can choose to curate our online experience to be more nourishing for our mental health.
Right. We can be more selective about what accounts we follow, prioritize positive content, set limits on our screen time.
That's all great advice. This is all so interesting, but it feels like we've only just scratched the surface. It's clear that there's this really complex interplay between the evolving nature of psychiatric diagnosis and the rise of technology, particularly social media. It makes you wonder how much they're both influencing each other.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions to consider. Are we seeing an actual increase in mental health issues, or is it that our understanding of these conditions and the influence of technology are just changing the way we see and diagnose them?
That's something to think about. It seems like we need to take a closer look at how technology, especially the internet, is changing how we access information and think about mental health.
I completely agree. And that's where we'll pick things up in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore how technology is shaping our understanding of mental health, the whole idea of self-diagnosis, and the new forms of support and treatment that are popping up.
Stay tuned for that because we're just getting started. Welcome back to the deep dive. So last time we were talking about how psychiatric diagnosis is changing and how social media impacts mental well-being, and I'm really interested to see how technology, specifically the internet, is changing how we think about and approach mental health.
That's a really important part of this whole conversation. I mean, the internet has totally changed how we get information, and that includes information about mental health.
It's true. We've gone from encyclopedias and libraries to, like, having all the information in the world right there on our phones. It's amazing, but it's kind of a lot to take in sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And while it can be really good to have that access to info, it also has some downsides.
Like what? Tell me more.
Well, one thing we're seeing more of is self-diagnosis. People are finding all these symptom checklists and online quizzes that say they can tell you about your mental health.
So people are like turning to Google instead of asking a professional.
It's happening a lot more, and it makes sense that people want to understand what they're going through, but self-diagnosis can be kind of dangerous.
Because the information online, even if it looks legit, doesn't always tell the whole story.
Right. Self-diagnosis can lead to people misunderstanding their symptoms, getting the wrong idea about what's going on, and even trying to treat themselves, which can be harmful.
I get it. It's like trying to fix a car engine just from watching YouTube videos. You might end up making things worse.
That's a good analogy. You can find a ton of information online, but it can't replace the expertise and guidance you can get from a real mental health professional.
So what's the main takeaway here? How can we use all this information online in a smart way?
It's all about balance, you know? The internet can be a great way to learn about mental health, find communities for support, and connect with professionals. But we have to be careful about what we believe. Always check to see if the sources are credible, look for evidence-based information, and most importantly, talk to a qualified healthcare professional for any diagnoses or treatment recommendations.
So you're saying being a good online researcher is really important for mental health.
For sure. Now, switching gears a bit, let's talk about telehealth and these digital mental health interventions. This is where technology is making a real difference.
So telehealth is basically having therapy sessions online.
Right.
That seems to have gotten super popular in the last few years.
It's definitely becoming more common, and it's more than just video calls with a therapist. Telehealth is like a whole range of remote healthcare services, including things like mental health counseling, medication management, and even virtual support groups.
So it's kind of like bringing mental health services to people wherever they are. That must be so helpful for people who live in areas without a lot of services, or if they have trouble getting to in-person appointments.
That's exactly it. Telehealth has really opened things up and made mental health services much more accessible, which is a big step in the right direction, especially for people who might not have been able to get help before.
Seems like technology is breaking down those barriers and helping more people get the care they need.
That's one of the best parts. And along with telehealth, we're seeing all these new digital mental health interventions popping up.
What exactly are those? They sound pretty high tech.
We're talking about things like apps, online programs, and even devices you can wear that track your mood and sleep. They're using things like virtual reality for therapeutic purposes.
Wow, it sounds like technology is becoming this powerful weapon in the fight for better mental health.
It has so much potential. These digital interventions can provide personalized support, track your progress, and even help you learn therapeutic techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT.
It's like having mental health support and tools right in your pocket.
It is kind of like that. But it's important to remember that these digital tools aren't meant to replace traditional therapy completely. They usually work best when they're used together with professional care.
So it's about integrating technology into a more well-rounded approach to mental well-being.
Right. And like with anything in healthcare, it's important to be careful. Choose tools that are evidence-based, come from reliable sources, and really fit with your needs and what you're looking for.
It sounds like technology is both making mental health more complicated and simpler at the same time. There are more ways to access care and support, but there are also new things to think about and new challenges to face.
It's a complicated mix, and as technology keeps advancing so quickly, we need to keep having conversations about its role in mental health care. We need to make sure we're using it in positive ways while also being aware of the potential risks.
It's about finding that balance where technology can help people take charge of their mental health, but also remembering that human connection and expert advice are super important.
I couldn't agree more. Technology is a powerful tool, but it's just that, a tool. In the end, it's the human element that really makes a difference in healing and recovery.
And that brings us back to the human side of things. How can we as individuals stay mentally healthy in this world where we're always online?
That's a great question, and it gets to the core of what it means to be resilient and thrive in this digital age.
Okay, so tell me, what are the secrets to doing well in this digital world?
Well, there's no magic formula, but there are some important things to keep in mind, and it all comes down to having a healthy relationship with technology.
A healthy relationship with technology. That sounds tough in a world where our phones are like part of us.
Yeah. It might seem hard, but it's totally possible. The first step is awareness. Becoming more aware of how we're using technology, how it affects our thoughts, feelings, and actions is super important.
So it's like taking a step back and really looking at how much time we're spending online, what we're doing, and how it makes us feel.
You got it. Once we know that, we can start setting boundaries. This could mean things like limiting screen time, making certain areas of our homes tech-free, or choosing certain times of day to unplug. It also means being careful about the things we see and hear online.
It's kind of like making rules for our digital life. Like we might have rules for healthy eating or exercise.
That's a great comparison. Just like we choose healthy food over junk food, a healthy relationship with technology means being picky about what we're consuming online.
So maybe that means unfollowing accounts that make us feel bad and following ones that inspire us.
Exactly. It's about making our online world a place that supports our well-being instead of draining it.
I love that. It's like making a digital safe space for our minds.
I like that. It really captures the idea of making choices to put our mental health first in this digital world.
And that's where mindfulness comes in, right? Being present instead of getting sucked in by notifications and everything that's happening online.
Mindfulness is so important for well-being in general, but it's even more important in this digital age. It's about being aware of our thoughts, feelings, and what's going on around us without judging ourselves, and then using technology in a way that fits with our values.
So we're in control, not letting technology control us.
Exactly. And along with mindfulness, it's really important to have real-life connections to balance out the isolation that can come with being online all the time.
So putting the phone down, getting off the computer, and really experiencing the world around us.
Exactly. Spending time with people face-to-face, being in nature, doing things we enjoy, and having a sense of purpose, these are all so important for well-being.
It's like reminding ourselves that life isn't just on a screen, and that connecting with people is essential for our mental health.
You said it perfectly. And just like we take care of our bodies with healthy food and exercise, we need to take care of our minds with meaningful connections and experiences.
It's amazing how everything is connected. Our mental health is affected by so many things: our biology, our environment, our relationships, and now, even more so, how we interact with technology.
It's a complicated web, and understanding how it all works together is crucial if we want to deal with the challenges and opportunities of this digital age.
Because it's not about avoiding technology or trying to live without it completely.
Right. It's about finding that balance where we can use technology to make our lives better while still prioritizing our mental health and nurturing the human connections that really make life worth living.
You're so right. It's about finding that sweet spot, that mindful way of using technology that supports our overall health and happiness.
That's it. And with technology changing so fast, it's more important than ever to talk about this, raise awareness, and empower people to make choices that are good for their well-being.
Because it's not just about getting by in the digital age. It's about thriving.
Absolutely. It's about building resilience, staying connected, and embracing technology's potential while staying true to what makes us human.
What a great way to wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've gone through some pretty complex stuff, from the details of psychiatric diagnosis to how technology and mental health are linked.
We've looked at how the internet is changing how we think about and get mental health care. And most importantly, we've talked about ways to stay well in this digital world.
And now, as we move into the last part of our deep dive, I'm excited to go even deeper into how individuals can shape their own mental well-being and talk about practical steps we can all take to thrive.
Stick with us as we continue to explore these topics and provide insights that will help you on your journey to mental wellness.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring this world of psychiatric diagnosis and how technology impacts mental well-being, and it's been a really interesting discussion so far.
It has been. We've talked about how hard it is to define and classify mental disorders, how social media can be both good and bad, and the rise of digital mental health interventions.
And now for this last part, I want to focus on something we haven't talked about as much, what individuals can do themselves. It's easy to get caught up in all the diagnoses and the impact of technology, but we're not just along for the ride, are we?
Not at all. That's a really important point, but sometimes gets lost. We actually have a lot more control than we think. We're not just being given diagnoses or being controlled by technology. We can make choices that help our mental health and well-being.
So it's about recognizing that we have a part to play in our own mental health.
Exactly. And it starts with understanding that mental health isn't just about not being mentally ill. It's about being well, living a good and meaningful life, even when things are tough.
Just like they say, mental health is a journey, not a destination.
I like that. And like any journey, it takes effort and resilience and being willing to go through the ups and downs.
So what are some practical things we can do to feel that sense of well-being? What does that journey look like?
Well, one of the most important things is taking care of ourselves. That means paying attention to our basic needs, getting enough sleep, eating healthy food, moving our bodies, and doing things that make us happy.
Taking care of the basics is always a good start. But it sounds like self-care is more than just bubble baths and face masks.
Yeah, you got it. Self-care is also about nurturing our emotional well-being. This might mean practicing mindfulness, finding ways to relax, setting healthy boundaries in our relationships, and asking for support from friends, family, or professionals when we need it.
So it's like building a set of tools we can use to support our mental well-being.
That's a great way to put it. And just like you might change your workout routine depending on your needs, we can change our self-care practices to fit us.
Because what works for one person might not work for everyone.
Exactly. It's about finding what makes you feel good, what helps you feel grounded and strong.
And that brings us back to being self-aware, right? Paying attention to our thoughts, feelings, and actions, and really understanding ourselves.
Self-awareness is the key. It helps us figure out what triggers us, see the early signs of stress or burnout, and make choices that match our values and goals.
It's like having this inner guide that points us toward a path of well-being.
I love that. And along with self-care and self-awareness, having a growth mindset is also really helpful.
A growth mindset. That's about believing that we can always learn and improve, right? Not thinking that things can't change.
That's right. It's about seeing challenges as opportunities to learn and grow instead of as threats.
So it's about changing how we think and seeing challenges as a chance to learn and become more resilient.
You got it. A growth mindset helps us bounce back from tough times, keep learning throughout our lives, and build resilience. And resilience is crucial in today's world, especially with all the information and challenges that come with being online.
It's like what they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly. And that strength is what helps us navigate this ever-changing digital world. It's not going anywhere, so we might as well learn how to thrive in it.
Absolutely. And speaking of thriving, I think it's important to talk about the power of community.
Yes, community is so important. Even though we're hyper-connected online, we need real-life connections to truly thrive. We need supportive relationships, a sense of belonging, and people who make us feel seen, heard, and valued.
It's about finding our people, those who get us both online and offline.
Exactly. And that feeling of community can help protect us from stress, provide support when things are tough, and give us a sense of purpose in life.
It's like having a bunch of safety nets to catch us when we fall.
I love that. That feeling of connection is so powerful, especially in a world that can feel lonely sometimes, even with all our digital connections.
It's like a reminder that we're not alone in this. We're all in it together.
That's a beautiful thought. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive. We've covered some complicated and nuanced topics, and I hope our conversation has been helpful and empowering.
It definitely has been for me. We've discussed the challenges of diagnosing mental disorders, the good and bad of technology, and how important it is to be in charge of our own mental well-being.
We've explored how the internet is changing how we think about and access mental health care. And most importantly, we've talked about ways to be well in a digital world.
And on that note, we'll say goodbye for now. Until next time, keep being curious, stay connected, and keep exploring the things that matter most to you.